It hasn't exactly been the best couple of years for the U.S. men's national team. Interest is at a low. And I know, there's still plenty of passionate fans out there, but winning back the casuals, yeah, that's going to take some work. And failing to qualify for the World Cup, well, that was just embarrassing. There's a lot that goes into it. I mean, some people are blaming roster selection, some people are blaming pay to play, some people are blaming U.S. soccer for failing to identify hundreds, if not thousands of players. And some people are blaming MLS for not having promotion and relegation and or following a winter schedule. And I'm not saying these players would have changed history and made the U.S. a soccer world power and we'd be World Cup champions. But I'm not saying they wouldn't have changed history either. So here we go. In no particular order, 4 MLS players I wish would have gotten more of a chance with the U.S. men's national team. These are guys that have a couple caps but never made a World Cup roster and who I think could have made a difference. 1. Luis Robles. You know, of all the positions for the men's national team, the one that has probably the least amount of controversy is goalkeeper, because Tim Howard has been the guy for such a long time now, and Raguzan has been the backup. And most people are fine with that. Most people accepted that because, let's be honest, Timmy's a legend. He's an unbelievable talent. But now that we're moving on to the next generation of keepers, you have guys like Bill Hamid, Ethan Horvath, and what seems like everyone's favorite right now, Zach Steffen. One name you don't hear named is Robles. You know, Luis's story is really pretty amazing. MLS used to have this series called MLS Insider. Oh, which, by the way, if anyone from MLS watches this, please bring back MLS Insider. Seriously, one of the best shows ever. But anyways, I definitely recommend everyone to watch that episode on Luis Robles. Playing in Germany, going through a couple different managerial changes, and fell out of the first team. And then he moved back to the United States, where he didn't really have anyone scouting him. Eventually, he and his wife just said, screw it, we'll do it ourselves. And they just picked up the phone and started calling teams out of the blue. Yeah, anyone that tells you you can't get a job by just cold calling a boss, they're lying. Because Luis got a shot with Red Bull New York. His first match, a 4-1 victory over Toronto FC, and then he goes on to play 183 straight matches. That is almost 6 straight seasons of never missing a single match. Easily an MLS record. 2015 MLS Goalkeeper of the Year and an MLS career mark of 1.26 goals against. Basically what I'm saying, he's been really good for a really long time. But only 3 caps for the U.S. men's national team. And now that he's 34, probably too old to break back into the lineup. I mean, look, the U.S. has produced a lot of really, really good keepers. I can name 3 or 4 people that also deserve to be on this list, but they've all had to sit behind Tim Howard. I just think it's extra unfortunate timing for Luis Robles. 2. Chad Marshall. This one I can't really figure out. I mean, you could make the argument that Chad Marshall is the best defender the league has ever seen. I mean, he is the only 3-time Defender of the Year in MLS, and he also finished 2nd in voting last year. He actually had a chance to go to Europe after his 2008 MLS Cup victory with Columbus Crew, a game in which he scored the game winner, but he elected to stay in MLS. If Chad would have played abroad anywhere else in the world, he would have been a national team mainstay. That from Herculez Gomez. And I'm not sure he's wrong. I mean, Chad Marshall stayed in MLS and didn't receive a single call-up between May 2010 and January 2017. That's the same window as this guy, who we all know wasn't the biggest MLS supporter. What's frustrating is that Chad Marshall, he did pretty good when he got his chance. His big break came in the 2009 Gold Cup, where he performed admirably, 5 matches and earning Gold Cup all-tournament honors. He was a part of the preliminary 30-man roster for the 2010 World Cup, but didn't make the final 23-man roster. And after that, he just never really got another opportunity. 3. Dax McCarty. Okay, this one is a little biased, because admittedly, Dax McCarty is probably my favorite current player in MLS. I love the way he plays. He's so good at winning the ball in the midfield. He's so good at finding that early through ball. And Matt Doyle, the armchair analyst for MLSsoccer.com, I like what he had to say on Dax McCarty.
McCarty never lets a scrambling defense reset itself. He understands that any team's attack has a better chance of creating an opportunity if the opponent is lost in transition. It is his most outstanding and underrated skill as a player.
Here's McCarty continuing on, lays this ball off, and the shot by Nikolic is in!
McCarty doesn't have the gaudy stats, but that's not his job. His job is to protect the back line, initiate the attack, and help his team win.
You know, in 2017, Bastian Schweinsteiger was the big signing that made all the waves for the Chicago Fire, and he was huge for them that year. But I could argue that Dax was just as important of an acquisition on the field. I mean, he's the heart and soul of that midfield for the Chicago Fire, just like he was with Red Bull New York for all those years. But the thing is, this guy exists, and this guy is really, really good. Kind of the same deal as Howard, Michael Bradley has been a mainstay in the lineup for a really long time. And in 2014, remember, you also had Jermaine Jones and Kyle Beckerman. So Dax making that squad maybe wasn't realistic. It looked like he was finally going to get his shot in 2018. He was on the bench for a lot of World Cup qualifiers. But then, well, you know what happened. 4. Taylor Twellman. Yeah, I'm going a little farther back on this one because I'm still annoyed over the 2006 World Cup. You see, the U.S. got placed in the group of death, where they went up against the Czech Republic, Italy, and this little African country called Ghana. The United States crashed out of the group stages with 2 losses to the Czech Republic and to Ghana. How'd that happen? Oh well. It's not like we're ever going to lose to them again. You know, after 0-2, where we made the quarterfinals, getting eliminated in the group stage was a huge disappointment. But it's not like the U.S. was a bad team. I mean, they finished on top of the Hex for the World Cup qualifying with 22 points. And in the 11 friendlies before the World Cup, well, they only lost twice. Once to Germany, who we know is really good, and once to Morocco, who... Okay, that one's not so great. But even still, my biggest frustration with 06 was the final roster selection. In particular, up top, the forwards. Brian McBride, Eddie Johnson, Brian Ching, and Josh Wolf. Nothing against those guys, but seriously? You're leaving off Taylor Twellman? I mean, that guy was a machine in the 2000s, scoring at a ridiculous clip. 17 goals in 25 games in 2005. That's a goal in 68% of the games he played. Good enough to be named MLS MVP. You know who didn't have as good as stats in MLS? Eddie Johnson, Brian Ching, or Josh Wolf. And even though he got off to kind of a slow start in his international career, Twellman was starting to figure it out, scoring the last World Cup qualifier against Panama and scoring a hat-trick against Norway in one of the friendlies. Still to this day, I don't get the snub. Twellman's career was ultimately cut way too short because of concussions, but he's now doing his thing on ESPN, and personally, I think he's killing it. Especially when he says stuff like this.
What are we doing? What are we doing?
You know, admittedly, he wasn't even my first choice, but I'm actually pretty excited about the Greg Berhalter era for the U.S. men's national team. It seems like we have a direction we want to go. A lot of young players already playing in Europe, and we've got some serious talent in MLS too. I see guys like Mihailovic and Lima and Corey Barrett. I mean, they might be good enough to make the jump to Europe someday. I would love nothing more than for MLS to become that springboard to Europe for emerging national team talent. But it looks like, for the guys I just mentioned, their window of opportunity is up. That's just 4 MLS players who I wish would have gotten more looks from the U.S. men's national team. I know there are so many other players out there. I can honestly probably make like 10 more videos of this. So what do you think? Who did I miss? What MLS player do you think was good enough to be a national teamer? Let me know.